Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we are playing Chess Ultimate, which is basically this new fun variant of chess that adds a lot more elements to this game and looks really cute while doing so. So, what are these new elements? Basically, in addition to these normal chess pieces of the bishop, knight, queen, rook, and pawn, we have all of these other pieces that we can play and experiment with. So, this is a new account over here, and each of these pieces is behind a particular paywall. So we need to buy these with keys. However, be sure that there's no in-app purchases required, and we can get these keys quite easily by just playing some online games. So let's get started with one. Now, before we actually hop in and play a game, this also has an element of game building to it. So all of these pieces that we have, we they have their own point values, and we have a total of 100 points to play with. So I think for the first game, let's just make a normal chess setup and let's see how we do. Okay, and we seem to have found a game, so let's begin. Okay, so our opponent has a bunch of pieces, so besides the normal one, they have a Jester, Berserker, Sniper, and they've played their first move already, and they've used the connected rooks to take our pawn on c2. I think we now block their connected rooks so that that rook is trapped on c2, and we probably trade it for our bishop. So it's worth noting that the bishop in this game is worth 9 points and the rook is worth 13. So this trade is in our favor. Now, they have a bunch of different pieces, like the sniper over there. And the sniper is basically a ranged piece that moves, or rather, it captures without moving. So, as we see over here, the sniper can move adjacently to, like go to different files, but it cannot capture on those same files. It can only capture like straight, and that is a ranged one. And whenever it captures, it needs to sleep for a turn after that. So they've taken our pawn on c2, sorry, f2, and there's nothing we can do about that. So I think we continue development by allowing our bishop to basically fianchetto, and they now move the Berserker. So the Berserker is another piece that moves like the king at the start, but after every piece that it takes, it gets more powerful in that instead of only being able to move one square, it can move two, three, and so on. Alright, so now let's move our bishop over to g2 and target the checker piece on a8. So the piece on a8 is basically free. However, if we do that, we have the pawn which can block our bishop over there, and that would allow the berserker to capture, and that would make it very strong, which we do not want. So let's just develop our pieces, maybe lure the berserker into our position a little more. And now that it's here, that checker piece is basically free. So let's quickly take that and think about how we want. So I think the game plan needs to be some sort of a battery along the diagonal, and go for at least one of the two kings. And I think I haven't told this, but the jester is basically a false king. So basically to confuse us, and that's why there's no such thing as a check when a gesture is in place. And oh, so they've taken our knight, basically sacrificed the rook for it. This was a good attempt because if we hadn't taken back with the rook, They had a place to enter their Berserker, which could have been quite a mistake. But now I think we try to move the Berserker away from our position while still keeping it defended, and then get the queen and bishop into a battery. Yeah, let's continue targeting and moving the Berserker out of there. Maybe attack it with the queen now. With any luck, they miss it and we get to take the Berserker for free. And they've now moved their checker piece, allowing us to take this Berserker. And after this, we can also here now make a gambit, which is we could take the pawn and force the checker piece to move, but that would only work if that is the real king. And seems like it was because our opponent just resigned and we won our first game. Now, using these two keys that we got, let's go ahead and buy ourselves one of these fancy pieces. So, as from our last game, I want to give the Berserker a try, and it's also probably the cutest piece for me, so we'll go ahead and take this. Let's see the quick walkthrough of how to use a Berserker, make sure we know all of the movements. So, move 1, it moves one step. Now we can capture. And as soon as we capture, we also note that from being worth 15 points, this Berserker is now worth 30 points, showing just how much more powerful it has become. And now, as you see, it moves 2 squares in each direction. So let's go ahead and take the next pawn. And finally, with 3 pieces, I think now just moving in front of the king should be a checkmate. So a very slow piece to begin with, but even if you get a single capture, it's definitely a force to be reckoned with. So let's go ahead and make a new setup with this Berserker in mind. So the Berserker is worth 15 points, so slightly more than a rook, but I think it would work great supported by 2 other rooks. So let's quickly make this setup and have some pawns to protect our king from being too open. And let's hop in and look for a game. And we have found a game for trying out our Berserker. Now, I did go ahead and make a small change here just in case there were any snipers to take our Berserker off immediately. And without wasting any time, our opponent seems to take their sniper and pick up our free pawn, also putting the king in check. So we do have to move this king, but let's also take a look at what our opponent's setup actually is. So they have a symmetric setup with sniper, knight, a copycat, and a devil. So this does work well for us because the berserker does go well into a devil, which basically spawns pieces. But let's move our king to safety and take a look at how the copycat moves. So the copycat is this set of 2-in-1 pieces, and they both move in the same. So if I move one of them diagonally, the other also moves. And the way the devil works, as you can see, is that it spawns these minions. So, like the sniper, the devil also needs to rest every second turn. But as soon as a minion is spawned, like you just see, the minion moves by itself without actually taking a turn from the opponent. So, something that can be exploited, but also we need to be careful with. And why it works well with the Berserker is that the opponent can't really do anything now to move these minions. So we just need to place our Berserkers correctly and we'll be able to take these minions, making our Berserker much stronger. And let's just line up our rooks on the file in front of one of their kings. in case we need it. So we can now go ahead and take the first minion, allowing our Berserker to then move 2 steps in any direction. So this does look like a game where we'll be able to get a very powerful Berserker, but it might also become a gamble because we don't know which king is real. And like I just mentioned earlier, these minions can become very tricky in how they just took one of our rooks. So let's go ahead and take another one of these minions with our Berserker so that it does not take a rook and we also don't waste a tempo. Now using the same Berserker, we can take this other minion and we have a pretty strong Berserker over here. Now, just in case we lose the gamble to which king is real, let's also have another Berserker, sort of ready to go at least. So let's take this minion, and the opponent has flooded the board with a lot of minions. So if we're not careful, we might end up in a situation similar to how we lost the rooks to a fork. We might just lose one of our berserkers or the king. So that's why king safety is still important in this variant. And with that, we now have two pretty strong berserkers. So let's go ahead and take one more minion. And I think we're now ready to go into the attack and threaten the king. So now capturing the minion on c6 should give us the last check we need so that at least one of those kings cannot do anything anymore. And with that, I think we've gotten the correct king. Yep, and that's a knockout. With that, we win our first game with the Berserker. Now, there are more keys and more characters that we can unlock, but seeing how much I like the Berserker, I want to give it one more try for one final game. So let's get back in the queue. And with that, we have our final game. So our opponent seems to have a setup of a lot of rooks, checker pieces, and two new pieces for us, which is the penguin and the bomb. So these are quite tricky pieces to work with because the way it works is whenever the bomb captures anything, it explodes all pieces in a 1 square radius, both ours as well as the opponent's. So it can be a double-edged sword. And the way the penguin works is whenever it moves, it freezes everything in a 1 square radius. So here we had a free pawn which we could take because the checker piece can't capture over as their own pawn blocks it. And if the bomb takes our rook, that is a trade I am a-okay with because the bomb by itself is worth 20 points, which is 7 more than our rook. And they would also lose the added pieces of their penguin, a couple pawns, and the check. Now, they moved the penguin, which does block our rook over there. So let's double our rooks to keep it safe in case they move their king to try and take it, which they do. And now I think we can go ahead and take the pawn in front of their penguin, which should be a forced checkmate because their penguin can't really move anywhere, and we should be good. And with that, the enemy again resigns, and we win our second game. So let's quickly take a recap over here to why this was a checkmate, because I understand this can be confusing to someone seeing this for the first time. So if we head into the replay here, we see in this position, uh, we are basically threatening to take their penguin, which they can't move, because firstly, it would be a discovered attack on their king, and if they don't do anything about it and we take their penguin, we have our rooks which are doubled, and we also attack the bomb at the same time. And if we take their bomb, their king also explodes. And if their bomb takes our rook, their king also explodes, thereby giving us the win. Alright, and that's it for this video, folks. I hope you enjoyed. Please comment below which piece you would like to see next. Alright, peace.